Good morning, everyone. So now that everyone's here, we're just going to start our day off with about a 6-minute progressive muscle relaxation video. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Nick, we can't hear.
Muscle relax.
Okay.
Thank you for telling me that.
But then we heard
Something
something.
just popped on. I was wrong. Sorry, it just didn't start. The noise didn't start for a second. That's my bad. So sorry.
Okay, no worries. Sharing on this thing's always horrible.
Progressive muscle relaxation is an exercise that reduces stress and anxiety in your body by having you slowly tense and then relax each muscle. This exercise can provide an immediate feeling of relaxation, but it's best to practice frequently. With experience, you will become more aware of when you are experiencing tension, and you will have the skills to help you relax. During this exercise, each muscle should be tensed, but not to the point of strain. If you have any injuries or pain, you can skip the affected area. Pay special attention to the feeling of releasing tension in each muscle and the resulting feeling of relaxation. Let's begin. Sit back or lie down in a comfortable position. Shut your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Begin by taking a deep breath and noticing the feeling of air filling your lungs. Hold your breath for a few seconds. Release the breath slowly and let the tension leave your body. Take in another deep breath and hold it. Again, slowly release the air. Even slower now, take another breath. Fill your lungs and hold the air. Slowly release the breath and imagine the feeling of tension leaving your body. Continue breathing slowly throughout this exercise. Try to focus on the feeling of air filling and leaving your lungs. It will be normal for your mind to wander. When it does, do your best to bring it back to the moment. Now, move your attention to your feet. Begin to tense your feet by curling your toes in the arch of your foot. Hold on to the tension and notice what it feels like. Release the tension in your foot. Notice the new feeling of relaxation. Next, begin to focus on your lower leg. Tense the muscles in your calves. Hold them tightly and pay attention to the feeling of tension. Release the tension from your lower legs. Again, notice the feeling of relaxation. Remember to continue taking deep breaths. Next, tense the muscles of your upper leg and pelvis. You can do this by tightly squeezing your thighs together. Make sure you feel tenseness without going to the point of strain. And release. Feel the tension leave your muscles. Begin to tense your stomach and chest. You can do this by sucking your stomach in. Squeeze harder and hold the tension. Release the tension. Allow your body to go limp. Let yourself notice the feeling of relaxation. Continue taking deep breaths. Breathe in slowly, noticing the air fill your lungs, and hold it. Release the air slowly. Feel it leaving your lungs. Next, tense the muscles in your back by bringing your shoulders together behind you. Hold them tightly. Tense them as hard as you can without straining, and keep holding. Release the tension from your back. Feel the tension slowly leaving your body and the new feeling of relaxation taking its place. Notice how different your body feels when you allow it to relax. Tense your arms all the way from your hands to your shoulders. Make a fist and squeeze all the way up your arm. Hold it. Release the tension from your arms and shoulders. Notice the feeling of relaxation in your fingers, hands, arms, and shoulders. Notice how your arms feel limp and at ease. Move up to your neck and your head. Tense your face and your neck by distorting the muscles around your eyes and mouth. Release the tension. Again, notice the new feeling of relaxation. Finally, tense your entire body. Your feet, legs, stomach, chest, arms, head, and neck. Tense harder without straining. Hold on to the tension. Now release. Allow your whole body to go limp. Pay attention to the feeling of relaxation and how different it is from the feeling of tension. Continue taking deep breaths. Begin to wake your body up by slowly moving your muscles. Adjust your arms and legs. Stretch your muscles and open your eyes when you're ready. You've completed the progressive muscle relaxation exercise. Repeat this exercise daily to experience the ongoing benefits of relaxation.
All right. Thank you, Nick. How you guys feeling? Yay. 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 Was that a slightly different experience this time? Yeah. So, well, first of all, welcome back. Welcome. I'm glad to see all of you here joining us once again. We are past the halfway point, so that's good, but I hope that you have been gleaning great information that you're going to take back and change your school. Yay! So progressive muscle relaxation. I'm glad that we did that one. That is one of the self-regulation practices that you can definitely pass on to your students, but it's a great one for you as well. There are different variations of progressive muscle relaxation. So that was one, and I thought that was a really good example in terms of guidance. If you try it on your own, so if you've ever had a massage done, so they will often ask you if you want, gosh, it's been so long, I forget the terms, but like the normal, whatever the normal one is, or the deep tissue massage. And so with progressive muscle relaxation, it can actually simulate the deep tissue massage or the deep pressure, where they're getting to that tissue and that tissue underneath the muscles and the fat that's on top. So they get down to the nitty gritty. And so deep muscle relaxation can actually simulate that. If you are holding the pressure long enough, so not to exhaustion, we don't want anyone to hurt themselves, but if you hold it longer, for time's sake, we had to do a shorter one. But if you hold, for example, the tension for a count of 10, or whatever you find works for you. So hold it as tightly as you can until that count, and then you release it all of a sudden. So when you first start to hold it, it's going to reach whatever muscles and tissue is at the surface. And then the longer you hold it, it's going to start to reach deeper down. You know what I mean? So you can do it that way. And the other variation, the way that I use it and that I teach it, is, you know, how the person guiding that one did. He started at with the feet, with the toes, with the feet, and then added on gradually each muscle group. If I do it as a cumulative kind of thing. So if you start wherever you start, you can start at the top and work your way down, or vice versa. But you, once you get to the legs, you're tensing your feet and your legs. Then when you get to the thighs, you're doing your feet, your lower leg, and your thighs. And then, so by the time you get to your chest, for example, your whole, everything under that is still included when you're tensing it, not just your core area, or not just your chest area. It's all of that. And so you get that repeated pressure to some of those parts that need it the most. So just a little note for you to keep and try it your way, see what works and what you like. And that's one that is actually really great to teach, because it forces you. We talked about this. We carry tension in our bodies. We carry our stress in our bodies, and it forces the relaxation of those places where the tension is being carried. So, all right, let's jump on in. Chat. All right. All right, so just in terms of setting the focus for the day, so we know where we're going and what in the world we're doing, here we are. We've made it to day 3. We're going to be talking about students' needs and other considerations, in particular for the restart of school. So it would be the same topics that we would be teaching in any training, but we want to make sure that it's also relevant for your school restart. These are the 5 premises that we've been, that we're building on throughout the week. So the neurobiology of trauma affects behavior in ways that are beyond students' control. So we want to move away from that perspective of behavior being willful defiance. And the second premise, that trauma shows up in the body first, and that the behavior that you're seeing is also communication of a need that needs to be met, and we can meet that need with support. And then the necessity of calm. So in order for the students to be calm and remain calm and return to calm, we ourselves have to be calm and help our students to regulate through our regulation. And then consistency and predictability create safety. These are the 4 R's. So realizing trauma, understanding what it is and how it impacts our students and how it impacts human beings. Recognizing the signs and symptoms of dysregulation, and so that we can intervene early and intervene effectively, and then responding, having a toolkit. So today we are going to continue to try to build up your toolkit so that you can respond effectively. And we will talk about slightly resisting re-traumatization, but we're going to gradually move into that between today and tomorrow. So the focus for today will be the responding. TREPeducator.org is our website. I'm trying to remember. There was there was something that Stacy wanted you all to see specifically within our professional learning community. Let me take a peek. Let me just go. Let's see. I am not sure, so I will go ahead and skip that. I forgot, she sent us a text this morning to remind us what the PLC would be. But I will just show you, we kind of perused the website slightly yesterday. I did not point out that we do have a tab that is specific to COVID-19 and the restart, and some resources for you that are specifically tailored to that. Like, that's why we created that tab. Didn't exist a short time ago. And I think it may have been under the consistency and predictability tab, which I am going back to now. You'll see some of the resources that have been mentioned in some of your presentations. I know one from yesterday, and then tomorrow you'll be going more in depth through these tools. The first 5 minutes of class, planned transitions, expectations, procedures, and things like that. So this is where you can find more information, and that's under the professional learning community under consistency and predictability. So I'll come on back. All right, so today, this morning at least, the first thing that we're going to do is talk about talking to your students specifically about trauma, and then also specifically about grief and loss. Let me pause this for a second. All right, I want to know from you, when there are tough things to talk about, when tough things happen in the community, and that affect, that you know that the students are impacted, you know that they are talking about it, how is that typically handled in your schools, like right now, as you know, prior to this moment? How is that typically handled? Do your principals direct everyone to ignore it, or do teachers just kind of make their own isolated decisions, or how is that currently handled? And you can just talk freely. Anyone?
I know with recent events, with COVID and all that, and the riots and the protests, because we weren't in person to do any discussions, our admin team actually constructed an email to send out to our school-wide community, including parents and guardians and students. And then I do know that teachers themselves, if they were comfortable, took initiative to reach out to their students, and some hosted some online discussion boards, as well as Google Meets to meet one-on-one with students as well.
Nice. Very cool. Anyone else? And maybe not specific to COVID, but prior to all of this happening, how would it have been? How would it have happened for you guys?
I feel like a lot of times at our school that teachers will come together, like if it's something that has been big, we'll share ideas about how to facilitate a conversation with kids. But I feel like in classrooms that I know of that, we have a daily morning meeting, or there's been, there'll be a class meeting and a conversation. I feel like that we take the time to talk with the kids about, what they know, what their questions are, and responses that they want.
Awesome.
Sometimes our school's done a big action, like,
Okay.
And so I feel like we often are willing to talk about stuff and address.
Okay, good. I'm actually glad to hear that, because that doesn't happen everywhere, but it sounds like it's kind of a teacher directed, like we need to talk about this, and you all make those decisions. Okay. Has anyone been in a building where the administration has kind of been pushed away, where the administration has pushed away from having you all discuss things that are like in the news or, major events in the community? Has anyone been in a building like that or no? No, good. Wow, I have. I'm glad. I've seen some.
I feel like after September 11th, I was in a school that just didn't know how to talk about it. And and individual teachers would talk to it with kids, but weird. It was really weird coming back to school after that. And
interesting.
That there wasn't that structure wasn't there in that building.
Wow. Now that's, and I have honestly been curious about that, like how that was handled, afterwards. So there was no, your district didn't handle it as like often when there's something big in the community, like, I don't know, like a school shooting or something, they'll send counselors to each school to actually support kids and all that. So none of that district-wide kind of effort.
We were way up in the Bronx, and so that happened
wow.
downtown.
Okay.
I mean, there's one dad from our school who worked in the towers who died, but and I think the teachers, we did like a fundraiser, and there was some stuff, but it wasn't what I'm seeing now. More awareness and in spite of the politics. I think that was part of it. That there was like this political, not sure what to say thing. And I mean, I'm glad to be in a different place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad that we have moved from that. So, because that's that would be super critical.
But I think the next school I went to, though, it was really different, so it just, I think, depends so much on leadership too. Like, even if the principal at the time had been like, oh, this is important, let's address it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the case,
Okay, good. So I definitely just wanted to check in because I was in a building where some really tough stuff was happening, and the kids were just, they're crying in the hallways, and the teachers are crying, and, and I didn't know, it seemed like the principal wasn't really aware of what was going on, on like teacher level and student level. So I just, kind of shared just very generally, with them, like, there needs to be something going on. And he's like, yeah, no, don't mention it. Do not talk about it. Do not, we're not going there because it's too sensitive. That's what he said. It's too sensitive. And he was very direct, like no activities. Because one of the teachers had asked me, can we plan some activities for, addressing this in student-friendly ways? And so I had something to propose, to him, like this might be a, way that it can be handled. We don't have to talk details, about what the kids don't need to know. But very, very guarded and explicit about, we are not touching that at all. And so, which was really sad for the kids because they still to this day, other than just talking amongst themselves, have not gotten to express it or process it in any kind of healthy way. So, so it's important. So that is, so that's where we're going with all of this. The most important thing is talking about it. And just making sure that it's done. It's imperative that we address traumatic events that have collectively happened to the students, or things that they're hearing about in their homes, in their communities, or within the school. Now, there are things that we need to do to prepare. And so that's one reason that I'm glad you all are here, and here in the summer before school is starting, because there is some preparatory work that should go into approaching those conversations. So before the actual conversation happens, these are some things to consider beyond just the actual conversation. So in preparation, we want to consider what the kids are going through. So we have to consider their perspective, what they're really dealing with. Sometimes the adult perspective and how the adults are experiencing a thing, any major trauma, can be different from how the students are experiencing it. So the fears might be different for different reasons, just because we're coming from two very, very different vantage points. The concerns, the questions, and even some of the emotions can be very different. And so we want to consider the child's point of view. The other thing, so in particular, this is really important with COVID when we prepare to address that further, especially if it hasn't been at this, and it's still ongoing, so it still needs to be addressed again, even if it has prior. But there are compounding factors, and those are the additional losses. So the trauma itself is this global pandemic, and what that's doing to communities and cities and states in our country and everything. But in addition to the traumatic event, there are things that make the effects compounded, make them even more intense. And so the reactions are going to be more intense. So for some of our students, in addition to just, being a part of this, being in the midst of this global pandemic, but as a result, things have happened where they have also lost their stability. So parents have lost their jobs. They haven't had the money. So now they're going to soup kitchens. They don't have a place to live, or they're in a shelter, or they're bounced around from house to house, or, they're being sent to live with a family member while the mom has to live in this place, or whatever the case may be. They're losing their sense of safety and security, and definitely their sense of normalcy. And that's for everyone, for all of our kids, that is a compounding factor. Stability also being going to school every day and having school as a safe place and as a resource. If something is going on, this is the place where I know that I can get help if I need it, or when I'm ready. So the losing their daily meals, their safe place, their connection to peers and positive adults, the predictability and routine that comes from, that helps them to feel safe and secure, the parents getting sick, or parents or loved ones actually passing away as a result of COVID-19, as well as loved ones passing away just in the midst of COVID-19, where where a lot of families haven't been able to get that sense of closure because they weren't able to have funeral services. They weren't able to just do some of those same things and gather with family and friends, that we would do during other times. I see that it paused my sharing and is not advancing, so let me just do a check. Well, I'll just keep it moving. Economic hardship for many of our students has been a compounding factor. Economic hardship impacts everything in terms of that sense of normalcy and being able to do and have the things that the kids are used to doing and having. One thing that we can highlight in regard to those compounding factors is focusing on, when we do get to the conversation, being able to focus on community-wide efforts to help families and people have those basic needs that have been disrupted. So making sure they have food, and they have places to go that are safe, making sure they have masks to help keep them safe. A lot of adjustments to payments for necessities, for for their home or their mortgage or their rent and the bills and things like that. So highlighting that the community is taking care of each other, so preparing in advance to know what some of those efforts are, so that that can be mentioned during the conversation. Another consideration that we want to just think about when we're addressing it is complex trauma. So things that your students have had to endure in part as a result, but this is just, this trauma, this pandemic is just piled on top of multiple traumatic events for a lot of them. And then the long-term effects of the increased exposure to all of these traumas, or one long-term, really, really difficult, kind of ongoing trauma. This can create an especially heavy stress load for children to bear. It can interrupt many aspects of their development, including their sense of self. So those students that we know are in homes that are unsafe and unstable, so they're experiencing domestic violence, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, and they have to stay at home. This is, this is the directive. They don't have an outlet. They don't have, if they get to the point where they want to tell someone, in many cases, there is no one, or they feel like there is no one. But just like they had that direct access on a daily basis to at least consider if I want to say something or not, that's been taken away. So they're experiencing this ongoing trauma, and then now we have this other thing just piled on top. So that is what we call complex trauma. Experiencing homelessness due to caretakers losing their job, instability, piled on top of these other traumas, and increased exposure to caregivers who misuse drugs and alcohol. Sometimes those things were done while the kids were at school, in large part, so they didn't get to see the whole process of, during, before, during, and after, and they're seeing all of that and really being exposed to the fullness of what that means and the impact of that. Another thing in preparation is trying to get everyone, all your adults, on the same page in terms of resources and information that's going to be used to support the conversation. So locating and deciding as a school or as a district on media that's going to be used to help explain any community-wide or collective trauma. And COVID-19 is just the example. So videos and graphic novels, comic books, any kind of guides that are released by trustworthy organizations are excellent assets to use. We want you to use those things, books and all of that, but we don't want teachers to just kind of pull at random, like every man for himself kind of a thing, where every teacher is just pulling some resources. Those who are doing it at the last minute won't have time to review certain resources, and they'll pull up something and it won't necessarily be appropriate. So you want to decide ahead of time on some really quality resources that you all may want to use as a school, because many of the videos and books that have potential to unintentionally scare children by prompting for frightening fantasies due to the images and the approach. Avoid images like the angry virus, or like you see the picture at the bottom right, where the person is dying, literally in the picture, they're in the midst of dying because of the coronavirus. Or this picture on the little caricature on the left is portrayed as the whiny little devil. That is that's their pictorial image of the coronavirus. It's a little devil that has plans to take out everyone in its path. So Even if the video is overall communicating a positive message, many children are going to fixate on the images. They're going to see the image, and whatever else is presented after that, they will miss. Like, they won't even hear it. They're going to fixate on that image, and it will start to trigger the anxiety, the thoughts, the worries, their own daydreams, and it'll enhance the things that they're already worried and concerned about. So look for fact sheets. The school or district should be using the same designated or created fact sheet to guide the teacher and student classroom conversation. So whatever's chosen, it should be the same in every single classroom, so that the students are hearing consistent information across the board. When siblings go home and talk about it with their parents, the same information should be coming out, because no matter where they are in the building, it's all consistent. The numbers should be consistent. Like, decide on what it is you all are reporting, if it comes up in conversation, and that's what it's going to be for the school. Of course, they should only come from trusted resources and should use terminology that is developmentally appropriate. Let's listen. Let's listen to this summary and talk in further detail about addressing trauma and COVID with your students. So this is just a doctor that kind of goes through some of the, some really good points about talking to kids about coronavirus. She's really talking mostly to parents. And also, this video was released early on in the pandemic. So we have grown a lot. We know a little bit more and have some other things to offer, but the points that she offers are really great, and we're going to use those as teachers, and we'll talk about them a little in further detail after her talk.
Hello, everyone.
No, not him.
Will you add your name to join my campaign? We still have a long way to
Sorry about that.
The playground where kids are playing with their friends. A lot of parents want to know how they can talk about this. Of the coronavirus is everywhere, from the front page of the newspaper to the playground where kids are playing with their friends. A lot of parents want to know how they can talk about this illness with their children in a way that provides reassurance and doesn't increase their worries. Here is some advice for talking to your children about the coronavirus. Don't be afraid to discuss the coronavirus. Most children have already heard about the virus, or they've seen people wearing masks, so they know something is up and you should not be afraid to talk to them about it. Not talking about the coronavirus can actually be worse, because kids can worry more if they think that you're avoiding talking to them. So use this as an opportunity to talk to them about the facts and to have a conversation without all of the emotion that they might be seeing in the news and hearing in school from other kids. We recommend that parents are the ones who consume the news and give their kids information that is factual and not so emotional or exaggerated. So use this as the opportunity to be the one to give kids factual information about what's going on with the coronavirus. Be developmentally appropriate. Do your best to not share too much information with your kids all at once, because this can be overwhelming. What you really want to do is answer them honestly and clearly and give them the information that you have. It's okay if you don't have the answers to all of their questions right now. You really want to take your cues from your child and answer what they're asking you. We recommend that you invite your children to ask you questions and to tell you the kinds of things that they've been hearing, and then you can tell them if that's true or not so true. We definitely don't want to ask them too many questions, because that can encourage more frightening fantasies. The point of the conversation is really more for them to come to you with questions and things they've heard, and for you to correct misinformation and give them the facts at hand right now. It's very important for parents to deal with their own anxiety first. Many of us are feeling pretty anxious ourselves about the coronavirus, but what we want to do is make sure that we're calm before we're talking to our children about the virus. If you notice that you're feeling particularly anxious at a certain time, make sure you stop and feel more calm before you have this conversation with your children. It's important to be reassuring with our kids. Children tend to be pretty egocentric, so it's common for them to worry that they will contract this illness or that you or other important family members will get sick. It's helpful to reassure your child that they are not likely to get this illness. It's actually a pretty rare illness at this point, and we think, from what we know so far, that kids are not as likely to get it. Focus on what you're doing to stay safe and healthy. Kids feel empowered when they know what they can do to keep themselves safe. So that's why we're emphasizing things like washing their hands. And they should know that this illness is transmitted usually through coughing or touching contaminated surfaces. During these kinds of stressful periods, it's important to stick to your routine. We don't like uncertainty. It tends to make us anxious. So sticking to routines is a way to maintain some predictability during these times of crisis. This is particularly important if your child's school or daycare shuts down. Make sure you're taking care of the basics just like you would over spring break or a regular summer vacation. Structured days with regular meal times and bedtimes are a really important way to maintain routines and predictability during this time. Something that's very important is that you keep talking, especially as we learn new information about this illness. Tell your kids that you will continue to inform them of any new information that you learn and that you want to keep the lines of communication open, so this is not just a one-time conversation, and tell them, even though I don't know the answer to this question right now, as soon as I have more information, mom or dad will definitely get back to you and let you know the answer to this.
Yes, so I thought everything that she said in terms of action steps to take are exactly the same that that we would recommend for teachers and for schools. So here we are. So those are the considerations prior. So here we are talking to children about the coronavirus. Number one, talk about it. And that's why I asked you all about that earlier. It has to be talked about if we want our students to be resilient and to come through whatever the trauma is. So this and anything else that comes up, the community violence and the rioting and looting and everything else that they've seen, all of these things, it's important that it is talked about and acknowledged in a way that is validating for students, because they have these worries and fears, and you're not going to present worry and fear by allowing them time to talk about it. That's already there. So they need help with how to process it. And that makes all the difference in how students actually get through it. Avoiding talking about any major tragedy or event can actually instill more anxiety, worry, and fear. As now children are also making their own assumptions and presumptions about why you're not talking about it. Why are you avoiding it? There must be even more to this picture, and they want to know. It also leaves them open to uninformed or limited view presumptions and interpretations that they're hearing from their peers or from other people who just don't have the correct information. Be present, be fully present during the conversation. So not just giving the kids a task and letting them do it on their own, a task related to, talking about the trauma, like turn and talk for the next 10 minutes, about this, and then we're done, we're moving on to math. But being present for them, letting them know you're here now and you're going to continue to be here for them if they need to talk again in the future. But just communicating that message that they are not alone and we're going to get through this together. I am a resource for you and I'm here to support you. So no one has to experience this alone. So making sure there's dedicated time taken out in the daily schedule to actually address whatever it is that needs to be addressed, particularly the students' emotional needs, doing emotional check-ins, circle times, one of you mentioned morning meetings, just dedicated time for open discussion for the students to be able to talk and process through what they're thinking. Let the kids lead, let the children lead. We don't have to go in and read fact sheets to them. Find out what's on their minds, ask questions, and unless there is, at the end of the conversation, there may be a couple things that haven't been addressed that you feel are very important for them to know, just kind of as closure. You can add on those things in the end, but other than that, you want to go, the adults want to go with whatever the kids say is on their mind, but also be in tune to what they're saying and what they're not saying when they do speak or when they do ask a question or offer a comment. So we're asking more than we're telling. We're answering the questions that and concerns that they do have. We're correcting misinformation. Let's see, pause the conversation as needed. Make sure the children know that they can ask you anytime more questions arise. And that's what I was saying just about, later, if you need to, when the conversation ends, or if you need to stop it early, letting them know that they can ask you anytime, and that's fine. Revisit it as needed. Listen carefully to what children say and what they don't say. When they are speaking, reflect back to them what you think they have said, just to check for understanding. It helps them to really feel heard when you can kind of give them what they're saying in your own words. And so they know that you really are listening. And when they hear it back, when they hear what they have said, it actually increases their insight. Sometimes we just say what's on our minds or what's on our hearts, say it the way it comes out. But when we hear it, reflect it back, it helps us to actually process it in a different way. And so then they can actually grow in their insight, and it helps with the processing as well. Create and provide opportunities to let the children voice what they know about the event. And that's always a great way to start the conversation. What do you know about this? There's so much talk. We've been out of school. We hear about it every day. What do you know about this pandemic, about what's been going on? Excellent way to start the conversation, and then work your way into, well, how are you feeling about that? Or how does that make you feel when you hear that? This is an important step. Letting them voice what they know is an important step in being able to correct misinformation. And it's a good segue for them talking about their feelings. Talking about feelings is harder than talking about facts. So start with the facts, or what they think is factual information, and then making any corrections as needed. Make sure, obviously, that we are keeping our answers on a developmentally appropriate level, which is a part of safety for them. Don't go over their heads, and don't give details that are unnecessary, that are unhelpful for what the child is specifically asking. Don't make assumptions. Don't go further about what they're asking. If they ask a very specific, pointed question, give them a very specific and pointed answer that they can understand. We have to be good models. So when children express having thoughts and emotions that have been challenging for them to deal with, we first acknowledge what they've shared, acknowledge how they're feeling. Like, you may just say, wow, that's really difficult. Or I can imagine how difficult that would be. Or I'm so sorry that you had to experience that or had to feel that. It is okay to also be open with them about the fact that you've had similar thoughts or feelings, if you have. You don't have to share unnecessary details, which can increase their anxiety, but just, wow, I have felt really sad as well sometimes. And this is what I did to actually help me through those feelings. So you can offer them some strategies by just simply offering them what you did, or what some people do when they are feeling XYZ. They try this, and this. So it's offering them some choices of things that they might be able to try. So you're focusing on strategies for how to deal with those really difficult emotions and feelings. Use this as a springboard to brainstorm together things that you all can do to help yourself feel better, to cope, or to take action, which can be an important part of the healing process. So this is what we're dealing with, and this is what, this is another part that, some people, a lot of people in our community are dealing with, not having food or not having stability. What are some things that we can do? Or reaching out, like in New York, I mean, I don't know if it was like all of New York or just, parts, but, on the news, we saw how, people would come out on their balconies and applaud the essential workers, I think at 7:00. And so that was an action step that actually was really, really helpful in the processing and the healing process for people, the coping process, coping with all of this, because they felt like they could take some meaningful action in the midst of all of this stuff that was going on that we have no control over, or very, very limited control over. And so when you offer something that children can do, it helps them to feel, to start to regain that sense of control. So I was really happy to see that. Be culturally sensitive, ensure that no stigma or blame is directed at any specific cultural or ethnic group. If students really start talking, they're going to repeat things that they've heard their parents say, or heard other people say, or things that they've read in social media. And we want to be really, really quick to correct any of those misconceptions and make sure that no one leaves that conversation thinking that these are appropriate ways to think or conceptualize what we're dealing with. So no one single person or ethnic group or cultural group is to blame for all that's happening. Even if it's something like community violence, and people may say, well, it's all these people that are doing this. But there's as an adult, there's so many contributing factors to what's happening, and to how people are feeling, and then to how they're reacting and how they're acting out, and all of that. And so just making sure that the kids aren't holding grudges against, just they aren't holding grudges based on these glaring or grand generalizations of a certain group. Consider students' capacity, pause and take breaks when things get too intense. Do an emotional check periodically, and that can be as simple as, how are we doing? How are you guys feeling? Is it time to take a break? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, thumbs down, depending on, if we need to stop, if we need to pause, if we can keep going. If it's electronic, if we're remote, they can give, do an icon or an emoji, those kinds of things, or just doing those checks, whatever it looks like, doing those checks periodically to make sure you're not overwhelming students. Once they've had enough information, they may just stop. They're not like tune out, so they can process what they've heard. And they may just need some time. Let me just sit back and think about all of this information, all that I've just taken in, because wow, it really blew my mind. And so we want adults to be on the lookout for those cues if kids are getting angry or frustrated, but also those behavioral cues, if they're just getting antsy, or they're tuning out, spacing out, or if they start, the disruptive behavior starts, they're tapping their pencil all of a sudden, like they were engaged, but now they're, kicking the desk, or they're falling out of their seat on purpose, or, just start the attention-seeking behavior, those kinds of things. Those are cues to let you know that the conversation is at a point where it needs to, this would be a good time to take a break. So it's getting too intense. They need some time to process. Pause it until a later time. Just leave an open door, because some other students may have more questions. They want to keep going, but let them know that if something comes up later or there's something still pressing, there are these other times that we can talk about it, or you can feel free to write me a note or ask me about it at lunchtime, or whatever the case may be. Know that it's the event that's the source of the stress. It's not the conversation. And that's what a lot of people fear, that if we talk about it, that's going to cause more stress, but it's not. It's the actual event that is causing the stress. If you have to take a break in the interim, reflect on, listen for, take any cues about the very specific source of the child's or children's triggers. Was there something that I said that made this kid kind of blow up all of a sudden? Was there something that was being talked about very specifically in the conversation at that point that may have been the trigger? And attempt to address it with that child or that group of kids, if possible, or just help them to engage in some coping strategies and calming strategies that have been taught so far. After the conversation, it's also a good idea to engage in your class-wide calming routine. Like, so if that's mindfulness, or if you have some other kind of routine that you do for everyone to breathe and de-stress, it's great to do that whenever the conversation pauses or ends. So we are going to take a look at some resources. So there's another half to this presentation. I'm trying to decide if we should do this at the end. I think we should do it now. So I was talking, earlier in the conversation, we were talking about having a consistent resource for everyone in your building to be able to use as their reference, so that everyone's communicating the same facts across the board. So I'm going to pause this. So in the chat, thank you, Nick. Nick has posted a link that you can click on. And it's just a list of psychoeducational resources that we want you all to just take a few minutes to look through. So since like the Bronx group, you all have a team, and legal prep, you all have a few people here, you can actually start at different points in the document, because we're only going to take about 5 minutes to do that. But take a quick peruse. Now you'll have it, now that you've opened it, you'll have it, so you can go back to it later. But see if there are any resources that you all really like that you want to either use or pull from to create your own resource that's going to be used throughout the building. So like I said, you just want it to be consistent. Let's see, Kat, are we ready yet for breakout rooms? We don't have to be, it's okay if we're not, but
We are though.
Okay. So we'll send you to your group so you can decide how you're going to tackle it. And we're just going to take, like I said, just about 5 minutes to get started, to find some things that you think might be good for your group. All right, welcome back. So I know that was super short. I know that you need more time, but like I said, you have it. You have the resources now, and you can go back to them as needed. I hope that you found some things that may potentially be helpful for you in creating your own resources or using it for your teachers. And so we just wanted you to peek at it really quickly, just start the wheels to rolling. So the second half of this presentation is actually, we specifically want to address grief and loss. So the reason that we want to address grief and loss is, the reason that we want to address grief and loss is that all of our students are dealing with grief and loss right now. And we want to reconceptualize that, as often when we think of grief, of course, we think of when we lose a loved one, or when we lose someone that's close to us, or someone that we know. But there are so many losses that we have, and so many ways to define loss and to define grief. And so we want to reconceptualize what's happened, or what is happening during this time, as and acknowledge the fact that all of our students are experiencing loss right now. And so many of them are grieving. So grief is the emotional aspect of experiencing loss and change. I told you you'd see her pop in one of these days. Children experience grief when there is a major disruption, there's a loss of normalcy, or any major transition in their lives and their relationships. So in this sense, all of our students are experiencing some form of grief. It can be mild. Stop, you need to lay down. It can be mild, it can be intense, and we'll talk about all the different types of grief, but just acknowledging that the fact that the students have lost their sense of normalcy. They've lost, for many of them, they've lost the one safe place that they had to go to on a daily basis. They've lost the sense of structure and routines. They've lost their sense of control, their sense of power and control. There were things that they were able to do and engage in, like their whole sense of safety for some children has been disrupted because there's no consistency, there's no predictability in what's going to happen from minute to minute, from day to day, and so on. So students that are experiencing feelings of grief are going to need some additional supports to reestablish the sense of security. When school restarts, they're going to need that in their learning environment. So recognizing and acknowledging their feelings will be the beginning of that. And opportunities that you create for them to share and process their feelings in the classroom will also help to establish that sense of security. Was that someone with a question? Okay, I thought I heard a voice. I minimized your faces so I can't actually see you. So just let me know if you need me to pause anywhere. So helping children to become aware of their emotions in order to process grief. Often children have difficulty understanding what they're feeling, and an even harder time expressing what they're feeling in words. So knowing, even understanding what's going on inside of me. I know that something's different, but I don't know what it is, and I can't really tell you. For more of your students, the first step might be helping them to identify what is going on inside. Do you feel like, does your stomach feel, does it feel like there are butterflies in your stomach? Do you feel tense? Do you find yourself clenching your fist a lot, or holding your shoulders up a lot? Does your chest feel tight sometimes? Or, do you find your heart beating fast sometimes? Or do you find yourself daydreaming a little lot? So starting with the physiological aspects that are easier to identify, and then helping them to connect it to ways to what those emotions might be that are connected to those physiological symptoms, and understanding how all of that might be, how their feelings then might be connected to their behavior, to the ways that they're acting or acting out at school and at home. There are stages of grief, and many of us have heard the stages of grief or been introduced to them, but it's important to acknowledge that these stages, people go through these stages even when it's not attached to a death, the loss in the sense of a death. But those losses of power, those losses of consistency, those losses of safety, all of that, these stages they'll go through these stages even if they haven't lost anyone close to them. So the stages are not meant to be kind of like a roadmap. You don't go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. You might go from 1 to 5 to 2 to 4 and back to 1 and on to 5 for a minute, and then revert all the way back to another stage. So I'm gonna just show you all 5 because your group of students in your classroom or at your school will be at any of these stages, or they'll be at all of these stages, just different students at different times. And so we just need to be able to recognize them for what they are, and so that we can be able to help and kind of address it. So denial is actually what I think, and this is just an opinion based on my counseling experience. I think that a lot of people in our society right now have gone back to the denial stage just because it's an easier place to be. It's an easier place to deal with. So I know that New York, for example, has gotten better and better in terms of the effects of COVID. You all are doing an exemplary job, right? Illinois was doing a good job, and now it has really flipped. So now we see a lot, well, I know I am seeing a lot of people not wearing masks and just wanting to get back to the way that things were. And you pass by shops, and even though the mandate is that we're still supposed to be wearing masks inside, and they're very, very specific rules to how businesses are supposed to operate, it's not happening in a lot of places. And I think that with my counseling lens, I think that it's because people are just tired. And so they've gone back to, and I hear people saying this, it's not, that's not real. Whereas not as many people were saying that before, other than in the beginning. That's not real, that's fake news, it's not gonna touch me, I'm young, I'm healthy, even though we know that that's not the truth. But I think that that's just the stage that they are, that they're at, and they're resting in because it doesn't take as much work. Some of your students will also be in the stage of anger or bargaining, despair, and depression, and some of them will have accepted it and really taken control of, I know that these are the things that I can do, not only to stay safe, but also to help others. And they're engaging in that, that acceptance stage, and that trying to regain a sense of control. So just important to recognize. Excuse me. And so let's take a quick break to pop into this video.
The COVID-19 pandemic is not only a medical crisis, but a psychological one. Along with the collective anxiety, stress, and sadness comes collective loss and sorrow. Loss can shake our senses of self. Many of us will have to cope with the loss of loved ones in the midst of this pandemic. Many are also grieving their sense of safety, of social connection, of financial security. Losing a job, not having a graduation ceremony, not being able to attend a funeral, all are losses to be grieved. What we are experiencing now is a living loss, and as we move forward, people will continue to experience losses we can't yet predict. Psychologists say that in addition to grieving what is now missing from our lives, we may also grieve for the ways in which those losses affect our senses of self and personal identity. If part of who you are is defined by social interactions, what does it mean for you when you are quarantined at home? It helps to name and claim our grief. People often have a vague sense of anxiety or suffering, but putting words to those losses can help them identify ways to move forward. Psychologists recommend journaling to help with this process. Since most of us have never been through anything like this, it can help to explore how you got through another challenging transition, like a divorce or losing your job. How did you heal and recover through that process? You can likely apply some of those strategies to this situation. Social connections are still important. Psychologists encourage people to stay connected with their social support networks through phone calls, text messages, video chat, and social media. For many people, it will take time to recover from their losses. Keep checking in on friends and family members, even after this period of isolation ends. Grief is natural, and most people are resilient.
Though grief is difficult, it helps to recognize that it's natural and serves a purpose. Grief can help people turn inward and adjust to a new way of life without the people, places, or things they have lost. Research suggests that once a crisis has passed, most people are able to bounce back and move forward with their lives. Know that while grieving, it's normal to fluctuate between moments of sadness and mourning and moments of acceptance or even happiness. It's also important to remember that grief is temporary. The difficult feelings will pass. For more information on how to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, visit APA's Pandemic Resource page.
Excellent. Really important reminders. That was from the American Psychological Association. Really important to acknowledge, and we would stop and talk about it, except for time. So I'm gonna kind of just breeze through these next few and see if we can capture some time at the end. But yeah, just really important to consider all of those other losses. So grief triggers unsettling emotions after a loss that can create feelings of sadness, loneliness, longing, regret, and more. So things that you are going to see, that you all will see in different students, and just realizing and remembering that, oh, this may be a result of grief. And so learning challenges, you're definitely going to see guilt and shame, especially if someone in their family has passed away. Children just being developmentally self-centered, they will often connect ways that they contributed somehow to someone's illness or passing away. Random outbursts of anger or sadness, uncontrollable crying, feeling empty, not feeling like themselves, feeling out of control and afraid, wanting to get away, just wanting all of this to be done, which we've kind of all felt that at some point, being embarrassed if some of those compounding factors have happened to them, or if they or someone in their family has tested positive for COVID, or just embarrassed about the ways that they're feeling, not knowing if this is normal, and I don't think I don't want everyone to know that I was feeling this sad, and inability to concentrate. So of course we recommend self-care. If you remember that house graphic where self-care, educator self-care was on the bottom and part of the foundation. So definitely caring for yourselves, especially if there's been loss, personal sickness or death in your families. Caring for yourself just because it makes it more sensitive. It's a more intense grief sometimes than some of the other losses, and there's more work that has to be done in the midst of that. So even for some of your teachers, it's important to note that if they have had some personal physical losses like that, that they may need some more support in leading conversations with the kids, being prepared for what some of the kids will say, and some of those generalizations and hypotheses that the kids will share, things that they've heard or overheard that are not accurate or are just misconceptions that can be harmful or hurtful. And so some of your teachers who have personally experienced the death of a loved one or have gone through having COVID or recovered from COVID themselves may, and allow them the space to be able to request that, but may need more support, like from the counsel. They may need to do it in tandem with the counselor or just with another staff member that can help to mitigate those times of intensity or sadness within the conversation, or if the teacher needs to step away for a moment to kind of get themselves together. But we encourage everyone to kind of do some work on their own, no matter what your experience has been during this time. to do some personal work so that you can get stronger in terms of being able to just talk about it and help your students through it. When talking with students about grief and loss, if they come to you just one-on-one personally, or if it's if a lot of students in the group have experienced certain things and it comes up, this grief and loss, always acknowledging the loss first. Acknowledging that, man, I'm so sorry, I can't imagine how hard this must be for you. It doesn't even have to be meaningful for you. Like some kids are like, man, you know, I'm so sad that we didn't get to have our 6th grade party, you know, at the end of the year. I've been looking forward to that for the last 3 years because that's the big thing. Or, you know, with kids in prom or junior prom because they'll still be in school. Those, you know, just those things that are important to them or they've been looking forward to. And as an adult, you might be like, you know, that's not so serious in the context of what's going on. But for them, if it's a loss, it's a loss. And it is just as important as any other loss. So just connecting with them, acknowledging that it's okay to feel that way. Like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, that, you know, something that is so important to you has been, you know, was taken away from you so suddenly, or I can't imagine how hard this must be for you. And especially, you know, if they've suffered actually the death of a loved one because of COVID or because of violence or any other means. Share information about grief in general. Make sure they have facts. Share how you felt. It hurts me to know that you lost someone close to you. So connect with them about how you're feeling, about their pain. Be real and allow them to be real and authentic. It's okay to express that you're angry or you're pissed off or you're hurting or disappointed, or, you know, all of those things are okay. All of our all of our feelings are okay. There are some limits on how we can safely express our anger and our frustration, but our feelings in and of themselves are perfectly fine and acceptable in this space. Answer questions, be prepared. Things that look like anger. Expressions of anger and aggression, just being mindful that it can absolutely be grief. That is one form that grief will often take on. At some point in the process, there will be anger. And if that is expressed, of course, not coming, and that's what, you know, all of this week we've been talking about it, not addressing it in a punitive way, but acknowledging that it looks like you are going through something really tough, like you're having some really intense feelings, or just connecting with them, like acknowledging that there's a reason behind what they're expressing. Supporting a student experiencing grief, went too far. So we've talked about a lot of these things in terms of planning ahead, redirecting behavior to a more positive way to kind of cope, modifying assignments. And one of your presentations is going to be, I think tomorrow, is going to be reducing the cognitive load. Like, there's already so much that's taking up their brain space. So it is very realistic and okay to modify assignments and modify the environment and things like that to help students to be successful, to find success, connecting with students, discussing with student, you know, opening up those conversations and being really observant to any signs of distress. Signs of distress can look almost like anything, especially misbehavior or off-task behavior. But in particular, changes in behavior. So students are typically this way or at this level, even if hyperactivity is their baseline, they're usually this way. And now I'm seeing some changes. And so those changes are really, really important things to pay attention to. When they need more help, you're going to, so these are just like different expressions of grief, different intensities of grief responses. The first one starting from more of a normal grief response to like the most intense, like traumatic grief, especially when there's sudden or violent loss. Knowing that there are places to go. So, you know, teachers know that there are places that they can, people in the building that the students can be referred to, but also having resources available for being able to offer support and resources to families. You know, places that, you know, parents or caregivers might want to take their kids, you know, to have more intense support through their losses. This is from that Coalition to Support Grieving Students. It's just their model. And for teachers, will you have time to plan ahead and review training materials located on that website, the Coalition's website, or planning the materials just for your buildings so that you're ready for students who need that additional support? I'm just going to flip through this really quickly to get to the end so we can take our break before our next presentation. After a little break. That's what I'm thinking. So I will take a look. We will pause here. That's a good stopping place. So that was a lot of information thrown at you for the last hour. I know that it was. You will have access to these slides. I don't know exactly when, but soon. Probably most likely before the week is out, you'll have the slides and as well as the recordings if there's anything that you need to refer back to. If you need more information, if there's something I didn't get to cover, of course you can drop it into the questions parking lot. If there are things that come up for you later and I'm here or another person is here, please feel free to stop and ask us. But we just wanted to acknowledge that your students are experiencing a trauma. They're experiencing grief and loss, all of them, collective loss, collective trauma. And it's important that we talk about it and that we have a strategy for doing so. So, everybody take a deep breath. All right, excellent, thank you. So thanks so much for engaging. Let's take a 5-minute stretch break to stretch your legs, go to the restroom, refresh your coffee and water, and I'll see you back at 07. All right, thanks so much.
All right, it looks like we've got the majority or enough people back that we can start with the mindfulness exercise. So this one is called the mindful walking meditation, which is something you can do either while you're walking or you can visualize yourself walking. Really, it's up to you. Here we go.
Mindful walking. Have you ever walked from one place to another, not realizing how you got there? Sometimes in our daily lives, we do things like walking without paying much attention to what we're doing. We can practice mindful walking and use our 5 senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch to notice our body and surroundings and bring ourselves into the present moment. To do this walk, plan to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes walking which you can do inside or outside. As you walk, become aware of how your body feels. With every step, focus your attention on each foot as it rises up, then steps onto the ground. Pay attention to every step. Feel your feet rise and step, rise and step. Notice the feeling of your weight on each foot as it steps onto the ground. If you find yourself becoming distracted or lost in thought, just pause and notice what is distracting you. Then bring your awareness back to the rise and fall of your feet with each step. Allow your mind to be still and just observe. Notice any thoughts that arise in your mind and just let them go. There's no need to interact with them. Just observe with openness and curiosity. If you would like, take a moment and notice your surroundings. What do you see? Look at the sky. Is it clear? Are there clouds? Are you near water? If so, is it moving or still? What do you hear? Can you hear the wind or the sound of cars? What do you smell? It might help to just pause and close your eyes and take a moment to see if you can smell anything. What do you taste? Can you taste the air? What do you feel with your hands? Take a moment and feel the solidity of earth beneath your feet. Reach down and touch the ground. Feel how strong and immovable the earth is. Remember that there is no right or wrong way to walk mindfully. Just take this opportunity to be present with openness and curiosity.
Thank you all so much. Thanks, Kat, for sharing. So just a way, showing us a way to be to be mindful in the midst of anything that we're already doing. I also just quickly, I wanted to say, so the video that I skipped over, I just put the link in the chat. Don't go to it now, but just you maybe want to copy it for later. So it's a good resource, particularly for teachers or other adults who are going to have these conversations with their kids and they're feeling uncomfortable with it. Just for them to watch and see how someone else has done it. It completely different context, but just to see another example, sometimes it's really helpful for just preparing our minds like, okay, I can do this. And so it may just be something that you want to watch or share with the rest of your staff. So so that is there for you. Stacey Williams has joined us to take over the next part. So thanks for being here.
All right. Well, it's good to be with you all again. Thank you so much. I am just prepping our next segment. So I really appreciate the work that Jamila has done on setting us up for these conversations, right? We've been writing during this time since the shutdown around preparing teachers to be able to hold space with those difficult emotions. So thank you so much, Jamila. As we talked about yesterday, it's really important, and I want to center us on this idea that we hold in the front of our minds that we're going through this collective traumatic experience, and that everyone is coming back at tier 2. Our tier 2 is now universal. It's now our tier 1, and everything has been bumped down. So those students that you would have been planning for some additional support in a small group are everyone. And then you're still going to have another small group of students who need extra additional support. And you're still going to have some needs for individual planning. Another shift with that we need to be making, but it's especially critical that we shift into this faster, is that the same tiered supports apply to our staff. So we're going to be needing to think about how do we do, for example, one of the tier 2 strategies we're going to give you is psychological first aid for schools. Maybe we need to think about making sure all of our staff is familiar with doing collegial psychological first aid, so that we can have on our radars what are some of the signs and symptoms that staff are in distress and needing support to cope. That isn't something that would have been on our radar in December, but it definitely needs to be on our radar now. So really thinking about this idea of tier 2 is now tier 1, applying to students and staff throughout the building. So whatever supportive strategies and planning that we're doing, we need to be doing that across the board for everyone, so that we can support our well-being as adults to be able to rise to this challenge to meet the needs of students. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And so I'm going to take us through some tier 2. I may move through this pretty quickly at times because I really want to prioritize you getting into your teams to do some planning and identify which of these tier 2 resources that we have curated, identified as possible to be done without the support of clinicians, that training or any sort of certification is very easy to obtain, and that staffing is possible with a lens towards under-resourced school staff, so that we understand that everybody's wearing multiple hats. Some of this is going to need to live within classrooms and be held by classroom teachers in small incremental pieces. Others of it are going to need to be pushed in by clinical staff in order to have a broader reach, rather than pulling out individual or smaller groups of students. So all of those types of thoughts and adjustments and modifications we have held in mind as we've wanted to create this set of resources on tier 2. How do we implement tier 2 in the classroom? So it's helpful for us to think about this latest advice from the National Association of School Psychologists, that it is really important that we're providing effective, we're providing effective social and emotional behavioral supports through these universal screening and tier 1 level of bringing tier 2 into that. So we'll talk a little bit more about this idea of screening as I go through this. And that is because what we know is that before COVID-19, there were students exhibiting anxiety and depression at a much smaller rate. Those typically would be students, maybe some slight symptoms at tier 2 in small groups, but definitely those were tier 3 students. Just after the shutdown, just after we moved to quarantine, we had more than 20%, and many students who were receiving mental health or behavioral supports were able to access those needed services. So the longer that we've been in shutdown, the less access they've had. And I know from our experience here in Chicago, many of the students who receive services at school were still not receiving services at home for a myriad of reasons. School was the delivery place. And so many of those students, it didn't shift with them to go home with them for them to receive those supports. So under these circumstances, we expect that number to possibly double or even triple in some of our demographics. It's kind of a shuddering high number of students. So when we think about this, our traditional model of one-on-one or small group counseling is just not going to be an option. It's just not sustainable. School mental health professionals will be quickly overtaxed and not good for anybody. So we have to figure out, how do we strategically leverage the resources of all the educators available and providers available? One of the things I encourage schools to do is to begin reaching out to community partners, if you haven't already, and identify whoever else through the mental health and behavioral supports that might be in your communities can partner with your school as well. But it's really important that we figure out what are some of the core sets of procedures that we can equip those folks, teachers who are on the front lines in the classroom, to reestablish safety within the classrooms, even in the virtual space, or especially in the virtual space. One of the tips, I mentioned this yesterday, I think, to this group, but some of our schools are utilizing staff who might be support staff. If you had a co-teaching model, or you had SICAs, or you had any sort of assistance, that those might be brought in to help co-lead, to help support discussions, and to help be a relational partner for students. So thinking about how you can use those interventionists and aides in other ways around this mental health support. So we want to think about the way that universal screening worked before this was that we could identify a smaller segment of the population who was most in need. Now, students are going to be coming back at such a high level, and it's possible with universal supports that we can bring the high number of students exhibiting high levels of need down to a smaller, manageable level, but it's not going to be right out of the gate. Right away, everybody's going to be so heightened that a universal screening is kind of going to be pointless or going to immediately indicate overwhelming the system. So we kind of set universal screening aside for the meantime and think about, how do we plan for universal supports right away for everybody? That way we don't hit exhaustion on the limited capacity before we've even really begun. So that's where we start thinking about classroom-wide and school-wide intervention approaches. I cannot stress enough how beneficial a school plan for mindfulness throughout the school day for everyone will be. And that can be done virtually. A couple of the schools I'm working with in Ohio are doing this, 3 different high schools, 3 times a day for everybody. They are all virtual. It's a mindfulness break that they've been able to get consistent about, and it gives teachers a mindfulness break, and they're communicating how much it's been helpful. If they're in a particularly difficult session and it's getting frustrated, they're thinking ahead for when that mindfulness break is going to come in. And so it's been an especially strong coping mechanism to have it at these consistent, predictable 3 points throughout the day. It also helps with students to be able to manage their own frustration tolerance, to be able to say, okay, I'm gonna get a break to just think about something else and breathe a little bit in 15 minutes, because they know consistently where that's going to come in. So thinking about other types of interventions we can get in, we've talked at length about the tiers, so I'm going to go through this a little faster. But when we're thinking about this is what I was saying before, that we want to provide those tier 2 interventions to the whole class. And then we're not waiting for behaviors to disrupt the class. We're on the front end. We want to make sure that we give class time to intentional mental health check-ins. It doesn't take a whole long amount of time, and we recommend that you don't spend a great deal of time. It's just a quick check-in. This can be done as a weather report, and you identify what different types of weather indicate. That stormy might mean getting angry and frustrated. Rainy might mean on the brink of tears. So you identify what you want those to mean within the class, and then do a whip around and just say, what is your weather report today? That can be a mental health check-in that can take under 60 seconds. And then you can flag those students who are rainy, those students who are stormy, those students who are gloomy, might be cloudy with a chance of showers. And then you can identify either for yourself or whoever else you're teaming with that so-and-so could use a check-in and be able to plan for that. So thinking about how we can talk simply talk about our problems and share the fact that this is tough on everybody, can be able to release it out of students' mind so that they have more space for learning. We want to think about whole class development of individualized self-care plans. Often we think about self-care, we prioritize it as educators in the TREP project. We have lots of material to develop your own self-care plan. We want to think about coaching students on doing this for themselves. It helps them to identify what are their soothing activities. What are the ways, we call it resourcing, where they can identify ahead of time 1 or 2 people that they have a good relationship with, that they can remember in times of stress or turn to for help and support, that they can also identify how they respond to stress and what brings them back down, what is de-stressing and calming for them. So it's really a beneficial activity that takes a very short amount of time and not a whole lot of prep on the teacher's side for students to develop their self-care plans. In the TREP Educator PLC on the website, there's resources on there for self-care plans that help you think through, like think about physical needs, think about emotional, social, environmental ways that you can de-stress, and you can modify those for students as well. We're working rapidly with our team to get those student-facing as well for you. So this is one example that we have of just a student-facing My Self-Care Plan. I'm not sure if this link, maybe Jamila, you can tell me, does this have a PDF link that goes out with the resources? Here's another one. So these can be, you know, made and authored by students to be able to coach them through just thinking about what are the ways that they can take care of themselves during this time. This one is specifically around the anniversary of a loss of a loved one. And that can be really helpful for students when they are struggling with that grief and needing to cope with those thoughts and those memories that can feel intrusive and tax those resources for learning. And so they can turn to these tips when thinking is just hard. So we want to also invest time in that psychoeducation. And this is where there were some resources that you went through with Jamila in the last presentation, so that there are, that staff feel comfortable. They don't need to have all the answers, and it's really important to get comfortable with saying, I don't know, and to say, I'll find out for you, and to tolerate the uncertainty. But it's really important to be able to welcome students' questions and not avoid their questions. And look at this opportunity to convey care and concern with your emotional tone. You want to be developmentally appropriate. I know that Jamila's done a good job of going over this already, but we don't need to volunteer too much information for, especially for younger students. So you want to find out, what do they already know? What have they already seen? What do they already need some kind of processing with? And really emphasize all that you and the school are doing to keep students safe. Remember that you're safe. School is a safe place. We're doing all we can to keep everyone safe. We're in touch with you. You can let us know what needs you have. We're here for you. That we will give you more information as we have information, but you are safe here with us. And then be sure to normalize that we're all in this together, that they're not alone, that this can be scary, but we're working on solutions. The world is working on getting a vaccine. We're all going to be back together again soon, and really work on expressing the fact that they're not in it alone. Even though we can't take it away, not being alone in it can be a huge, huge buffer to the anxiety for students. So we really want to think about that. The resources that are provided, we'll talk more about this through our discussion time, but it really is to increase functioning and management of those challenges. So it's really important to give time for both students and staff to have these resources. So we know that it builds capacity to take action to do this work, that it's really building that self-awareness of where we are in order to have the agency to determine what we need and where we need to go. And then helping us and our students identify their own strengths and resources. So when we're thinking about this, we want to make sure that there's a whole class support type session available. That's the way that clinical staff can push in. So we're thinking about a schedule where you can schedule time with a counselor or a clinician to do some whole class emotional processing activities. That can, one, build capacity for teachers, support them. So it could be like needing to have a discussion about grief and loss modeled. So schedule having the social worker come in and do that with the teacher present can actually help build capacity for that teacher to be able then to do it more often on their own. So we're going to dig into a few of these tier 2 interventions, and that's where I'm going to send you to your groups to be able to think about what of these tier 2 interventions. We have more details in a document that will go with you to your breakout groups, but I'll just preview them quickly. So I'd already mentioned psychological first aid. It's also called Listen, Protect, Connect, Model and Teach. And this is where there are certain signs to read and to look for in the environment of distress, and then to be able to have kind of specific things to walk through to protect and to connect, and then to model and to teach. So it's really a helpful, accessible kind of framework that schools can use and don't need the initial clinician. It is expecting to connect to mental health services when necessary, but on the front end, it's not clinician based. Support for students exposed to trauma is a group intervention for students. And so it is really through CBITS. So if you're familiar with the CBITS program, this is adapted even further down to be non-clinical interventions. CBITS typically is run by a social worker or a licensed clinician, but this is kind of CBITS for non-clinicians is kind of a short way to describe that. Stress inoculation training, it takes a group or service delivers through 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, where individuals are exposed to simulations or stressful interactions to build up their coping skill level. And then the Coalition to Support Grieving Students is a resource that is offers trainings for school-facing practitioners. So this could be any of the support staff that you are asking to help push into classrooms to help them with improving their approaches for supporting grieving students. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share, and those resources, Jamila, do you recall, are they in our link to send them to breakout rooms with the resources? Where are they? I'm going to grab those for you real quick. Okay, I think this might be it. And go there. Those are psychoeducation.
Stacy, I just dropped a link in the chat. Is that the link you were thinking about?
Yeah, Tier 2 in the classroom, the worksheet. I'm gonna peek at it real quick. Yes, thank you. That's what I was trying to get to. So let me bring it up. And then I will go back to talk through it real quickly. Thank you, Kat. That's what I was looking for. So make sure you grab that link so you can take it with you into your breakout rooms. But this is what it is. So it's this review of the non-clinical Tier 2 supports. And it has all of these different categories detailed out. So what are the demonstrated results? That's our connection to the research. What is the overall description? And then what are some implementation considerations? Also, we've thought about staffing for you, so you can think about the resources that you have available. And then we give you the manual and any additional resources that might be helpful. So that's for each one of these. What I'd like you to do is take this with you into your breakout groups. Jamila and I will be surfing in and out and popping in to help you with your discussions and thinking. And what we want to do is be able to consider what 1 or 2 of these do you think might be good for your environment, might be useful for you to think about making this at Tier 1 for everyone. So, and if any of these don't fit, we'll be available for conversations around that as well. So with that, go ahead and Kat, you can open up breakout groups and then we'll be popping in shortly.